Hey guys, Steve here from Nostalgia, putting this video together because in the last video I had made, I had a tremendous amount of comments. Most of them were actually very common. So what I decided to do is put together a video just to kind of outline what those frequently asked questions were and how to overcome them or how to deal with those problems. So we had people asking questions about how to load multi-disc games into BleemSync, so that way they can get multi-disc games through their PlayStation Classic hack. We also had a lot of questions where people were saying there's a lot of games or ROMs that they're downloading that have multiple tracks for one bin file. So it'll be whatever game it is, track 1, then track 2, then track 3, and in some cases there's like 30 or 40 or 50 tracks. So I'm going to show you guys how to load those ones on properly. I had a lot of questions where people were having problems with different USB USB sticks. So I'll talk a little bit about that. There was some comments about multiplayer support. And then what I want to do to finish up the video is just talk about my experience with kind of playing with different size USB sticks and kind of what I've noticed with the hack specifically and what we can expect going forward. So going right back to the very first point that I had made, questions about how to load multi-disc games onto BleemSync and onto your USB. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to do that. So first what we need to do is open up our BleemSync folder on our desktop. So this is where I'm going to be doing all of my work before I load it onto my USB stick. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my PlayStation 1 folder that has a bunch of my ROMs in it. And for the purposes of this specific transfer, I'm going to use Parasite Eve. And the reason I'm going to do that is because it has a disk 1 and it has a disk 2. And you'll notice that what I've got right here is disk1.bin, disk1.q, and then the same thing, disk2.bin, disk2.q. I'm using this because it's nice and simple. There's only one bin q file per disk, and there's not really a whole lot that needs to be done here. In my BleemSync games folder, I created a couple folders already. So in my case, I've got folder 17. I'm going to open that up and open up the game data, and that's where we're going to copy everything. Make sure that your PNG file is is labeled the same thing as your bin for disk 1. So in my case, it says Parasite Eve disk 1 in brackets. That's exactly what you want your PNG file to be. And your Q file is going to match exactly what the bin file is. So as you can see, my Q file here says Parasite Eve disk 1, and then same thing for the bin 2 and for the disk 2, the bin and Q files match. But the PNG file does not need to match disk 2, it only needs to match disk 1. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is copy that over, and that'll take just a couple minutes here. But other than that, it's not. There's nothing really special that you have to do. The only thing that you have to keep in mind is that you'll need a Q file for each disk, and that the Q files need to match exactly the way that the bin file is labeled. And then for your PNG file, you just need to make sure that your PNG file matches the disk 1 bin title. But other than that, it's pretty much it. Next, we need to edit the game the game file. We're going to edit that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just literally copy the name from the first bin file, and I'm going to label that right here. And then because there's 2 disks, you also need to include the second one. So I've got the title of the first disk, Parasite Eve disk 1, and then I'm going to put a comma, and then I'm going to paste the next title for the second disk. So it's Parasite Eve disk 1, comma, Parasite Eve disk 2. Then we just go on and we just finish filling out the information. So in this case, it's just Parasite Eve. The publisher for this is Squaresoft. It's a one-player game, and that was published in 1998. So we're going to save that. We're going to close that. And that's it. So that's how you're going to load multi-disc games for this hack. And then if we go back to our games folder, for game 18, this is one of the games that we're going to go and we're going to talk about a game that has multiple tracks. And one game that I thought was a great example is Rayman. So the ROM that I have here has a silly amount of tracks. So you can see track 1, track 2, track 3, track 4, and it goes all the way down to like 50 tracks, 51 tracks, and they're all bin files. So we know that Rayman came on a single disk, so we know that they're all related. But you'll notice here in the Q file, if I go ahead and right click that and I open that with Notepad++, you'll see all those tracks are labeled inside the Q file. So you can see track 1, track 2, track 3, track 4, and it goes all the way down to track 50. So we know the Q file accounts for all those tracks. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that our Q file has the same title as our first bin file. So Rayman track 1, that's what we're going to mimic, and we're going to put that as the Q file, and we're going to do the same thing as the PNG. So the PNG is going to be Rayman track 1, the Q file is Rayman track 1, and the first bin file will be Rayman track 1. All the other track files are going to stay exactly as they are, and all we're going to do is we're just going to copy all of them, and we are going to go ahead and put that in the folder as well. So that is going to take just another 30 seconds or so, but that's it. It can get confusing because you're a little bit concerned about having all these different track files and not accounting for them. But the way it's going to work is because that Q file has everything listed within it, if you've downloaded a good one anyways that was created properly, that Q file is going to have every other one of the tracks within it. It's all accounted for. So what we need to do is we need to point the console to look into that Q file, and then that Q file will indicate, hey, there's a track 2, there's a track 3, there's a track 4, and so on, and everything will be accounted for that way. For the PNG file, you have to make sure again that it's matching your first bin and your first queue. As long as all three of these all have the same title, all the same name, then they will work. Next, what we need to do is go and edit the game data. And what I'm going to do for this, because there's multiple tracks, again, all we need to do is just copy over the very first one. So we need to say, hey, we need to look for Rayman track 1.bin. That's it. When it finds Rayman track 1.bin, it will also locate the Rayman track 1.q, and that Q file will indicate and process that information saying, hey, there's multiple tracks. You need to also be aware of those. But other than that, the rest is simple. The rest is exactly the way everything else is done. So you just got to fill out the title. Rayman, the publisher for this is Ubisoft Entertainment, single player game, and this came out in 1995, I believe. And then we're going to save that, and we're going to close it. And now we're done with the ROMs, and we're going to go ahead and go back. Now, once we make any changes to the games, we also have to run BleemSync. So we're going to go ahead and find that, and we're going to run it. And that takes just about a second or so, and we're done. Now we can go back, and what we can do is we can move these. First, we'll move the games over, files 17 and 18 over to our SD card. Just going to make that move over right now. We're just going to copy these guys over, and that'll take just about a second or so for that. And the only other thing that I'm going to do as well is we have to move over the regional file, but I'm also going to move over everything just for the purposes of this video, because I'm on this USB stick that I'm using, I'm still running the old version. So what I need to do is I'm just going to override the old version that I have, and that's going to take just a second, but we're going to go ahead and replace those. So this will get me up to speed with the latest build. I think we're currently running 0.3.2, but yeah, so that's that. Now, before we go ahead and test this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to chat really quickly about some of the other issues that people were having while this is all transferring, since it's going to take a couple minutes anyways. Some people are struggling with the different types of USB sticks that they can use. It seems to be hit or miss. We know for sure that USB 3.0 sticks don't work well. If they do, it's very few and far between the brands and the makes that actually do work. So we recommend right now using a USB 2.0, but even using a USB 2.0, you're not necessarily safe. So I went out and I picked up a bunch of assorted USB sticks, some from no-name brands, then some from very reputable brands, and I certainly found that the no-name brands did not work. I could not get them to load, so I don't know if it's a quality issue or something along those lines, but those cheapo, really inexpensive 16 gig, 32 gig, 64 gig USB sticks are not going to be your friends in this situation. Ones that I know for sure are working, I've got a Gigastone 16 gigabyte USB stick that works really well. It's my reliable go-to. I've also got a Lexar, I think it's called like a flip and grip USB stick. Both 16 and 32 gig all seem to be working really well. So that's that. One thing I do want to mention is the larger the USB stick, I'm noticing the slower the operating system is loading and running. And I think it's probably related to the same problem that you would have had with a Raspberry Pi. The larger your micro SD card on your Raspberry Pi is, the slower your operating system would run. And the reason for that is because it's using that USB stick to load all the information right through the USB ports. So the larger the stick, the more information it has to process at any given time, which will essentially lead to a slowdown. Just like with, again, your Raspberry Pi, the larger your micro SD card, the slower it is because everything is being written and read from that micro SD card. The next thing that I wanted to chat about is a lot of people are saying, why can't we use a USB hub for multiplayer right now? And from everything that I'm reading with the comments that are going on with the hack on the back end, there is somebody who has developed some code that actually allows the PlayStation Classic to recognize a USB hub and to recognize two different controllers plugged into the USB hub. So that is something I would imagine is going to be either coming up on the next release or coming up on one of the next releases that are coming up. So that is something that is pretty exciting. My guess, though, is that it's going to be very similar to the USB sticks, where some brands of USB hubs will work and others will not. I did see some people that were talking about the files and about the hack that has to be done for the USB hub, that some people were able to get it to work with some brands and not with others. So that, I'm sure, is all going to have kinks in it. But from where we are right now, it's pretty exciting. We've got quite a bit of work that's been done on this PlayStation Classic, and it's only been out for like a week now. So I'm pretty excited about it. And the only other thing that I think I would chat about quickly before we switch over to the PlayStation Classic screen is my experience. And as I mentioned, the larger the USB stick, I've noticed it substantially decreased how quickly the PlayStation Classic was running. Right now, I'm at the standpoint of suggesting sticking with a 16 gig card. It limits the number of games that you can put onto it, but I'm finding that it works and runs really quickly. It's efficient. It loads exactly how you would want it to load, and there isn't any real hiccups. The 32 gig cards that I've used, they've been okay. I had at one point 43, 44 games loaded onto it. And because it's taking so much time to pull all that data, I noticed that right on the main screen where all the games were going to display, that none of the artwork showed up. And it took like 3 to 5 minutes of just waiting for that artwork to slowly populate. And even in some cases, I'd have to enter a game and then back out of it for the artwork to even show up. So there's clearly lots of little things that need to be worked out. But other than that, I think that's pretty much it. That's what I've got for you guys today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and switch over and pop our USB into the PlayStation Classic, and I'm going to show you guys that both the Parasite Eve game and the Rayman game are working after we had made those copies. So I'll talk to you guys in just a quick sec. All right, here we go. So now we've got our PlayStation Classic loading up. and we're now into the main menu here. So as you can see, I've got a bunch of the games that I previously put on here. I've got them, as I mentioned in the previous video, in alphabetical order, but Bloody Roar, Castlevania, Crash 1, 2, 3. I've got Digimon World, Dino Crisis, Hercules, Toy Story 2, Driver 2, Final Fantasy 7, Gran Turismo 2, Grand Theft Auto 2, Harry Potter's, and then here's our Parasite Eve, and here's our Rayman. So if you guys remember, Parasite Eve is the multi-disc game, and there isn't really a way for me to kind of showcase how it works because I just loaded it on. I'm not at a point within the game where it's asking you to switch, but I assure you, because we've labeled it in the game folder, we've labeled both discs, it will work. It should be fine. And the Rayman, this is the one that had that 50 tracks, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and play this so that way you guys can actually see that it does work. It will load, and there aren't any problems here. So I'm just going to go ahead and let that load up, and I'll show you a little bit of playing through it just so that way you guys can see that it is actually working properly.
Hi, folks! You want to know what's going on? Let me tell you the story of Rayman!
Alright, I'm going to go ahead and skip through just so that way we can actually show you guys some gameplay and you guys can see firsthand that it is functioning exactly how it is supposed to. But yeah, this is what you would do with any game. So if you had a different game that only had 3 track files, it's still the same process. Everything's identical. It's not as complicated as you may think it is. It's actually really, really simple. So yeah, other than that, that's pretty much it. I'm just going to go ahead and get started and show you guys a little bit of gameplay, and then we're going to call it quits for this video. So here we are. Just gonna quickly get through this just through this first level. It's pretty short. Get ourselves our power up. I honestly feel like this game is such an underrated game. It's been a favorite of mine ever since I was a kid, so I was actually pretty excited to see this game show up as a stock game on the PlayStation Classic. I feel like it's one of those games that a lot of people have played, but nobody really talks about. I just think it's a good all-around platformer, so it just brings back a lot of fond memories. I think this may have been one of the first PlayStation games that I ever actually played. So, but yeah, so that's pretty much it, guys. There's our video. So I've showed you guys how to load multi-disc games. I've showed you guys how to add games with multiple tracks. We talked about the different USB sticks. And again, my recommendation is probably sticking with a 16 gig card. I don't know that it's really necessary to have more than a 16 gig card right now. With that, you should be able to get between 20 and 22 different games onto that stick. And I don't know anyone who's playing, more than 20 games in a single session. So I think it's probably worthwhile to just stick to that, just because you get your best performance out of it. If you really want to fuss around with a 32 gig card, feel free to, just so you can have a large library. But my perspective is that you can always, add and swap cards and swap games, or even if you want to get 2 or 3 different USB sticks running at the same time, so you don't have to fuss around on the computer. You can just pop in whatever it is you want to play at any time. And because it doesn't actually mod your console directly, it's a nice soft mod that's really easy to put in and to take out all at the same time. So other than that, guys, I'm going to leave you be. I'll leave a link in the description to my previous video that'll show you how to do the full mod in case you haven't seen that. But other than that, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.